They laughed when they drenched her in Coke, thinking she was powerless. But what they didn't know was that she was the storm silently gathering about to rewrite the rules of justice, dignity, and power. The hiss of a soda can cracked through the open office like a gunshot. Before Zaria Bennett could react, a torrent of cold Coca-Cola drenched her natural curls, soaked into her navy blouse, and splattered across the market reports she'd spent 3 painstaking weeks preparing. Laughter rang out sharp and merciless. Oops, sneered Miranda Cross, the head of strategy, twirling the now empty can before tossing it on Zaria's desk like trash. Thought you could use a little refreshment for your stale diversity pitch. Zaria stood still. No trembling, no retaliation. The entire office froze in stunned silence. They watched, but no one stepped in. Fear had turned them into statues. Zaria lowered her eyes, but there were no tears. Only something deeper, something growing. She wasn't swallowing the humiliation. She was measuring it. She wasn't breaking. She was calculating. Because Zaria Bennett wasn't just an employee. She was the eye of a storm, calm, steady, and terrifyingly prepared. And that storm was about to break wide open. Trent Wallace, communications coordinator, an office clown, whipped out his phone to film the moment. "Yo, check this out," he shouted. "Brightwell's new diversity mascot gets baptized. Coca-Cola baptism, y'all." Laughter rippled. Chloe Hartman, the HR assistant, was doubled over laughing, typing furiously on her phone. "This is gold. When you hire based on quotas instead of qualifications, don't be surprised when you get soda showers and reality checks." She smirked. Zaria still didn't move. Soda dripped down her hair, smearing her inked charts. Her soaked blouse clung to her skin. Around her, people watched from behind screens and glass walls, some with shame, most with cowardice. But none dared intervene. What they didn't know was that Zaria's silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. They believed she didn't belong. They thought she was just another checkbox hire. But the joke, they would soon realize, was entirely on them. She picked up her phone with calm precision, her fingers flying across the screen. One message. "It's time. Are they ready?" No one understood it, but Zaria did, and their world was about to shatter. The time on Zaria's wrist read exactly 10:13 a.m. Her watch wasn't just any watch. It was an Athena moonlight, a one-of-a-kind gift from someone no one in that room had ever bothered to notice. Then came the ding. The sound of the private elevator at the back of the office, a door few had ever seen open, echoed like thunder in a church. 3 uniformed security officers stepped out, their gaze sharp and searching. Then came him, Elijah Bennett, tall, calm, powerful in an obsidian Tom Ford suit. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command an army or an empire. The room went breathless. He walked straight towards Zaria, his expression a mixture of concern and resolve. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Miranda stuttered, confused. "Wait, you know her?" Elijah didn't even look her way. He turned to Zaria and said 5 words that made the temperature in the room plummet. "This is my company now." The silence became unbearable. Miranda stumbled backward, face ashen. Trent dropped his phone. Chloe's hands trembled as she clutched her ID badge like it could shield her. Elijah placed a hand gently on Zaria's shoulder, a silent shield. "Brightwell and Company," he said, "is now under the control of Bennett Global Holdings. And Yuki," he stared directly at the 3, "have just publicly assaulted the chief strategy officer and my wife." Gasps erupted like aftershocks. Zaria finally spoke, her voice steady and hauntingly calm. "You all thought I was invisible, quiet, replaceable, that I was here to fill a quota. But while you were laughing, I was documenting." She reached into her bag and placed a thick folder on the table. Inside, voice recordings, emails, screenshots, surveillance stills, 6 months of microaggressions, stolen ideas, sabotage, and racism meticulously compiled. "You called it harmless fun," she said. "I call it a pattern, and today the pattern ends." The folder thudded onto the glass like a gavel. It wasn't just evidence. It was a sentence already written and about to be delivered. Just then, Marcus Din, lead counsel for Bennett Global, stepped into the room, accompanied by 3 legal assistants. He carried case files thick as bricks. The front covers read, "Internal Investigation Report, Racial Discrimination, Hostile Work Environment, Psychological Harassment." He handed the files to Miranda, Trent, and Chloe without a word. Elijah's voice was low but final. You have 30 minutes to gather your things. Any attempt to retaliate will result in federal litigation. Miranda's eyes widened. It was just a joke, she pleaded. Zaria turned to her softly but firmly. You called it a joke. I call it history. And starting today, I get to rewrite it. In the corner of the office, the employees who once laughed now sat frozen heads bowed. They weren't targets of justice, but witnesses to transformation. They had watched her suffer. Now they would watch her rise. Zaria didn't scream. She didn't throw anything back. Because true power never imitates cruelty. It dismantles it quietly, precisely, and forever. The conference room, once a shrine to polished cruelty, was now a courtroom. The main screen lit up, flashing a new title in bold white letters: Athena Core Discrimination Detection, AI creator Zaria Bennett. What followed silenced even the strongest egos in the room. Sophisticated charts, heat maps, sentiment analytics. Every tool designed to track injustice in real time. And all of it developed by the woman they had dismissed, disrespected, and drenched in soda. Chloe Hartman covered her mouth. Trent's lips parted, but no sound came. Miranda clutched the arm of her chair like it might save her from drowning. But Zaria. She stood with the stillness of a mountain. You poured soda on me, she said softly. But in doing so, you emptied your reputation into the fire I've been building in silence. They had mocked her, ignored her, erased her. Now she stood with the receipts and a revolution. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And no one in that room would ever see her or themselves the same again. Marcus inserted a second USB drive. This time the screen filled with chat logs, screenshots from a private Slack channel called Inner Circle. Zaria had never been invited, of course, but her name had been there every day. She looks like she took the 6 train from the Bronx just to breathe our air. Diversity Barbie clocked in. Who's betting she won't last till Q2? Remind me to Lysol the chair after she leaves. Miranda's face drained of color. Chloe choked back tears. Trent couldn't even lift his head. Zaria scanned the room and finally addressed the bystanders, her so-called colleagues. You didn't need to insult me directly, she said quietly. Your silence was the loudest weapon in the room. Every word sliced deeper than any outburst could. Because Zaria didn't need to scream. She was holding up a mirror. And in that mirror, everyone saw exactly who they were and who they had chosen to be when it mattered most. This wasn't just about the bigots. It was about the culture that let them breathe unchecked. When Elijah Bennett's LinkedIn profile appeared on the screen, founder and CEO of Bennett Global Holdings, the room collectively gasped. $7 billion in assets, a tech visionary, a name they had all heard of but never imagined was tied to the woman they'd humiliated. Yes, Zaria said calmly. He's my husband. A stunned silence. But that's not why I'm standing here. She turned to Elijah and smiled, not seeking validation, but standing in partnership. I never used his name. I wanted to earn my place, to see how far I could go when no one thought I mattered. And I've seen enough. Miranda fell back into her chair. Chloe shook her head in disbelief. Trent closed his eyes like waking up would erase this nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was a reckoning led not by the man in the suit, but by the woman they had overlooked. The same woman whose voice they ignored. Now it was the only one anyone could hear. Another USB, another set of horrors. Audio recordings, video footage, meetings where Zaria was interrupted, presentations where her ideas were stolen word for word, then claimed by Miranda. Clips showed her smiling politely while her work was repackaged, watered down, applauded in someone else's name. Elijah's jaw clenched. But Zaria stayed calm. She clicked through slides like a surgeon dissecting rot. This, she said, is the cost of silence, of complicity, of telling someone like me to just be grateful to be here. Then she opened her laptop and introduced the crowd to Athena Core, a patented algorithm designed to detect and prevent systemic discrimination. Fully owned by her, legally protected, market value over $47 million. She turned to Miranda, Trent, and Chloe. While you were laughing, I was building. While you were mocking me, I was writing code. And while you were pushing me down, I was designing the system that would lift others up. And now they didn't just lose their jobs. They lost their legacy. Zaria closed her laptop. The room was deathly still. She took a breath and spoke not with vengeance, but with vision. You destroyed my dignity, she said, but I rebuilt it not just for me, but for everyone like me. Elijah stepped forward with a final folder, one thicker than the rest. The Zaria Bennett Scholarship Fund, he announced. A commitment of $50 million. 1,000 full-ride scholarships for Black students in tech, funded entirely by the profits from Athena Core, forfeited shares from Miranda Trent and Chloe, and punitive settlements from Brightwell and Company. You thought you'd ruin my career, Zaria said gently, but what you really did was fund someone else's future. No one dared to speak. No one could, because they had witnessed the unimaginable, a woman rise from public humiliation, and build a legacy from the very hands that tried to destroy her. Miranda Cross sat alone in the now-abandoned executive office. The lights flickered above, casting long shadows on walls once lined with her awards. Her inbox was full hundreds of unread messages, but they weren't opportunities. They were severances, media inquiries, legal threats. Her name, once printed on Forbes shortlists, was now trending for all the wrong reasons. Miranda Cross, the fall of a corporate queen. She dialed former colleagues. No one answered. She emailed HR. The reply was swift and brutal, terminated for cause. She once believed her power was untouchable, that her smile could open doors and her title could shut mouths. But now her own silence had become her jailer. Every moment she ignored Zaria, every time she laughed or looked away, it echoed now like a scream. Zaria never needed to destroy Miranda. She simply let truth do what truth always does: expose, reveal, and leave nothing unpunished. Trent Wallace, who once strutted through the halls with his camera and cruel one-liners, now sat in a cold, silent apartment staring at the paused video on his cracked phone screen. It was the same clip he had proudly filmed, the one of Zaria soaked in soda, the one he posted thinking it was hilarious. Now it had been reposted millions of times, not as a joke, but as evidence. He'd been summoned to a disciplinary hearing by the National Marketing Board. He didn't speak during the session. He didn't need to. They played the video, then handed him the verdict: 5-year industry ban. His phone buzzed voicemails from recruiters canceling interviews. His inbox empty. His mother called trembling, "Trent, did you really do that?" He had no answer. In one click, one laugh, one moment, he had documented his own fall. Because sometimes the lens you point at others becomes the mirror that ruins you. Chloe Hartman used to believe she was innocent. She hadn't poured the drink. She hadn't shouted in Zaria's face. She just laughed and typed and shared. But now, in a quiet apartment 2 cities away, she held a letter trembling in her hands. It was addressed to Zaria. "You don't know me, but I laughed when I should have spoken. I was scared of being left out, so I joined in. That fear hurt you. I'm sorry. Not for what I did, but for the kind of person I chose to be." She didn't send the letter. She folded it, put it in a drawer, and cried. Because real guilt isn't loud. It whispers in the spaces where laughter used to be. It wakes you in the night when no one's looking. It rewrites who you are when the crowd is gone. Zaria would likely never read Chloe's words. But the impact had already been made, because true change doesn't begin with apologies. It begins with the silence that follows them. At Bennett Global's Tech Hub, a team of engineers worked in total focus. They weren't just coding. They were refining Athena Core, a system designed not to punish, but to prevent. An AI that could detect subtle patterns of bias in workplace interactions. One that could analyze word choices in internal emails, interrupt harmful trends, flag inequality before it became injustice. And Zaria, she didn't stand over them like a CEO. She sat with them shoulder to shoulder, her laptop open, her fingers flying. One intern whispered, "How did she turn pain into this?" The answer's simple. Because Zaria understood what few ever do. Data can destroy, or it can heal. And she chose healing. She didn't build Athena Core for vengeance. She built it to protect the next quiet girl in the corner so she'd never have to be brave just to survive. And that made Athena Core not just a product, but a compass. One that pointed every company toward a more human future. 1 year after the Coke incident, an image went viral. Zaria stood in a classroom at the Zaria Bennett Institute for Equity and Technology, chalk in hand, smiling. On the whiteboard, justice doesn't begin in court. It begins in the heart. The building had once been the headquarters of Brightwell and Company. Now it was a sanctuary, Scholarship students walked the same halls where Zaria was once mocked. But now they studied algorithms, ethics, AI, and courage. That day, a 17-year-old girl sobbed as she told Zaria, "Mom, I was told I'd never make it. Now, I'm here." Zaria knelt beside her. "You're not here by accident," she said. "You're here because you belong. No hashtags, no speeches, just presence." Because Zaria knew legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's passed on one student, one whisper, one spark at a time. And the fire she'd lit, it was only just beginning. In the months following Zaria's storm, corporate boardrooms across the country began to stir. For the first time, CEOs trembled, not at lawsuits, but at the mirror Zaria held up. Major firms initiated full audits. Recruitment policies were rewritten. Workplaces began adopting Athena Core not just as software, but as a moral compass. In Silicon Valley, a tech giant publicly released 5 years of internal promotion data. In Chicago, a banking firm quietly removed an entire executive board after Athena Core flagged 200-plus hidden instances of coded discrimination. Zaria didn't stand behind a podium to celebrate. She simply watched from a distance, arms folded, eyes firm. A reporter once asked her, "Aren't you proud of all this?" She replied, "Pride wasn't the goal. Accountability was." She wasn't chasing applause. She was planting pressure points quietly, precisely until the very floorboards of injustice gave way beneath those who once danced on them. This wasn't a trend, it was a reckoning, and the world was finally listening. At the first graduation ceremony of the Zaria Bennett Institute, a quiet figure stood near the back, hidden from the cameras. It was Marcus Bennett, Zaria's father, a retired city bus driver, the man who once woke up at 3 a.m. every morning for 40 years, the man who packed Zaria's lunch with a handwritten quote in her backpack every Friday. When Zaria walked across that stage, adorned in a black suit of poise and legacy, her eyes scanned the crowd. She found him. Their eyes met. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She nodded. He wiped his eyes not because he was sad, but because he had lived long enough to see the impossible. His daughter had made the world pronounce her name with respect. Later that evening, Zaria took the mic and said softly, "This award isn't mine. It belongs to a man who never had a corner office, but taught me that kindness is power, and silence, when rooted in love, can still raise a warrior." The room stood still, because behind every revolution is someone who quietly believed before anyone else could see. Every Thursday night, Zaria sat on the floor of the Institute's common room with her first-year students. No cameras, no speeches, just shared stories. One night, a boy named Elijah, named unknowingly after her husband, broke down. "I get told I'm not CEO material, that I sound too urban, that I need to fix my tone." Zaria didn't answer right away. She pulled out an old photo from her folder. It was her, soda-soaked, alone, the moment the world tried to drown her. "Do you know who this is?" she asked. Elijah stared. That can't be you." "It is," she said. "And I turned that moment into this school." Elijah sat taller after that. Next semester, he ran for class president. He won. Because sometimes what changes a life isn't a TED Talk or a textbook. It's one photo of your hero at their lowest and the realization that they rose anyway. That night, Zaria returned to her study. She opened a hidden drawer and took out the one item she'd never displayed publicly, the blouse she wore the day she was humiliated. Still stiff, still stained, still real. A journalist once asked, "Why keep something so painful?" Zaria responded, "Because I don't want to forget. Pain when buried rots, but pain when honored becomes legacy." That blouse now hung in a shadow box across from her Athena Core patent certificate, not as a trophy, as a warning, as a testament, because the world may one day forget what was said, what was posted, what was thrown. But Zaria would not. She kept the pain where she could see it, not to bleed again, but to remember that from this very cloth. She stitched the flag of a movement. The rain fell softly that morning as alumni, students, and supporters gathered for the Institute's one-year anniversary. No umbrellas. They let the rain soak them. To remember. To honor. Zaria stepped onto the stage, hair, damp eyes clear. "They asked me," she began, "if this was revenge." She shook her head. "No, revenge breaks, justice builds. I didn't burn the system down. I planted a better one beside it." Her voice carried, "This school exists because I didn't swing back, because I built when they tried to destroy, because I believed in building ladders, not walls." She scanned the crowd, young men, young women, once told they were too loud, too black, too poor, too different. Now they stood under the open sky, drenched in rain, full of purpose. And Zaria knew she had turned the worst day of her life into the beginning of thousands more. After the anniversary ceremony, Zaria returned to her office and found a small, unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photograph, her mid-motion coke dripping from her hair, blouse stained, face unreadable. Folded inside it a note, anonymous. "You don't know me, but I laughed when I should have spoken. I chose comfort over courage. And it hurt you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just letting you know you woke something in me I thought was dead." Zaria sat in stillness. No return address, no name, no expectation. But it didn't matter, because this was the apology that mattered most. Not performative, not public, just real. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't come from podiums. They come from the quiet reawakening of people who finally choose to unlearn cruelty. Zaria smiled through tears. She didn't need the world to bow. She just needed anyone to rise. In a rare national interview, Zaria sat across from the host of a major primetime news show. Halfway through, the host leaned in. "If you could go back to that moment, the second before the soda was thrown, would you dodge it?" The question dropped like a stone in water. The room waited. Zaria didn't blink. "No," she said. The host's eyebrows lifted. "Why not?" Zaria inhaled. "Because that one moment, awful as it was, planted the seed for all of this. It wasn't justice that changed the world. It was that moment of injustice witnessed." She looked directly into the camera. "And because I stood there and didn't flinch, millions now stand taller." Silence followed. Then the room erupted into applause. But it wasn't about the words. It was about the conviction. Zaria didn't turn tragedy into triumph by erasing it. She used it, transformed it, rebuilt from it. And that was the kind of strength no degree, no title, no money could teach. At the Global Equity Summit in Geneva, a panel of leaders from 50 countries unanimously voted to include a new term in their HR training standards, the Zaria effect. The definition read, "A transformation triggered by the resilience of one person in the face of systemic bias, resulting in widespread cultural reform." As it was read aloud, Zaria stood backstage, hands clasped, eyes closed. She never asked for her name to be remembered. But now it would outlive her. It would appear in textbooks, in corporate seminars, in whispered hallway conversations between interns learning how to stand up. Zaria walked on stage to a standing ovation. She paused at the podium, heart full. "I didn't fight for recognition," she said. "I fought so the next woman like me wouldn't have to." And with that, she took her seat, not in the center, not at the head, but in the circle, where every voice mattered, because that's what she had built. Not a monument, a movement. The Zaria Bennett Institute opened its third campus in Atlanta. At the press conference, a journalist asked, "What do you consider your greatest legacy?" Zaria turned, looking through the glass wall to where dozens of students of color coded in silence, huddled in study groups building software, laughing with ease. She smiled. "My name on this building means nothing if the people inside it still feel small. My legacy isn't a plaque. It's a promise that they'll be seen, heard, respected, without needing to bleed first." She paused. "And if I ever become just a name on a wall, I hope they take that wall down and build a window instead." That afternoon, a 12-year-old girl asked for Zaria's autograph. She signed her name, then whispered, "You'll write yours next, okay?" Because legacy to Zaria was never about remembrance. It was about permission to dream, to lead, to belong. One quiet morning, Zaria received a message from a teenager in South Bronx. "Ms. Bennett, I just got into the scholarship program. I'll be the first in my family to go to college. Thank you for not giving up that day." Zaria reread it, her chest tightening. She remembered the hiss of the soda can, the shock of cold, the burn of shame, the weight of silence. She remembered choosing stillness, then courage, then fire. She typed back, "You didn't just get in, you unlocked the future, and now it's your turn to build the ladder." The girl replied with 3 words that brought Zaria to tears, "I won't stop." Zaria leaned back, the light filtering through her office window. One act of cruelty tried to drown her, but she'd used every drop to water something bigger. Not revenge, not fame, a forest of justice, 1,000 ladders, and one girl who now stood taller because Zaria never let herself fall. Revenge tears down, justice builds. Zaria didn't fight back with hate. She built something greater with grace. Her story teaches us that silence, when rooted in strength, can shake the foundations of injustice and plant the seeds of revolution.